Hello, James here. I hope you guys are having a good day out there. Well, I decided I'm gonna make a couple of devices, and it's a next 5 minutes gonna make a controversial topic about interracial dating. For those of you who are into interracial dating, or your children are part of the interracial dating, please don't find this video offensive. This is for educational purpose use only, and the content creators who make this, that's their opinion. But I don't necessarily agree with most of what they're saying, and because otherwise. The second thing I want to be, you'd be surprised. So really, is to educate you. So if you are in a relationship, this is what you got coming at you with this kind of with this kind of rhetoric. So you need to understand where it comes from. That it's going to be some negative things to it, but in the end, I'm going to take you to the history, and at the end, it's going to be kind of long because I'm going to show you some current interracial couples that are together. And guess what? Who brought them together? Guess who brought them together? The Most High God. But for some people who are Israelites or pro-white or whatever, you're going to be shocked what I'm about to show you. But first, I'm going to start this first device, and we're going to go from there. And this is going kind of offensive, so just to warn you.
Artist in a showcase, or I would write a song for somebody.
I'm not man. I read for you the plain text. I didn't interpret it for you. I gave you the plain text of God's word, His laws, His commandments, and statutes. You choose what you want to do with it. Well, I don't know if you also know that God allows a man, He never allows a woman to be able to divorce her husband for no circumstances, but He allows a man to be able to. Matter of fact, I want to do a message one day called God is Sexist, and I can prove it with so many different scriptures. And the real feminists, they know this. They know what I'm talking about, right? Many scriptures, a woman can't even enter into a contract without a man. I'm talking about no contract. But interracial marriage is forbidden in the Bible. But check this out. I want you to see something real quick, because God doesn't want the woman to take you away from His laws, commandments, and statutes for following after Him, right? But God also allows you as a man to dissolve any marriage that takes you away from Him. He says that if your wife doesn't want to follow after the ways of the Lord, then you can divorce her. Oh my God. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the main reason is that the Most High God wants your loyalty to be to Him, His laws, His commandments, and His statutes, and to His Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord, our Savior, who is coming to redeem us soon. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Bible study for this week. Hopefully I didn't go too long. Hopefully it's not too controversial. But I will talk to y'all soon. Shalom, shalom, shalom. I'm sorry that I even have to cut it off right there. What a message. I had to cut it short. I didn't want it to be long. Y'all know I can get long-winded. I can talk forever. And I do go in extensive, a lot longer in this message on my exclusive channel at leodunsonministries.com. You can also go to ministries.leodunson.com. But just go to my exclusive channel. You can tune into this full message in its entirety. It's really, really good. You're going to love it. I hope that this clip, knowing this clip was kind of long, but I do pray that it was edifying and that it was inspirational in getting you closer to the Most High God. Thank you for tuning in. I will talk to you guys soon. See y'all next time. Shalom.
There's a $5,800 spending card going out to migrants, but you can also get.
Hold on.
Not on any meds whatsoever. Kids, because all this caping for swirlers, people are gonna get the wrong idea. This is not me defending my own personal lifestyle. This is me just saying what I think is right. I've never dated out. I've always preferred black women. Hell, I prefer darker black women if you want to go there, like the vast majority of black men. So, that Pew Research data. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Professor FD here to give you some actual data and play a game called Stop Getting Your Information Off of TikTok. So let's talk about the data that I've been using a lot for this video. It came from a Pew Research study from a couple of years ago. To give some caveats about the study, it is a study only about married for the most part, heterosexual couples. I don't know exactly if it gives that information. Now, marriage statistics is not the absolute best indicator as to what interracial dating looks like in America, but it gives you a pretty strong indication. With that in mind, based on your perception, according to this Pew Research data, what do you think is the most common interracial marriage? It's not black men and white women. It's not white men and black women. It's white men and Latino women, followed by white women and Latino men, followed by white men and Asian women. Black men and white women is tied for fourth with white men and multiracial women. If it bothers you that white men are more likely to date outside their race than any other group of men, yet nobody is accusing white men of hating white women, which is something they kind of definitely do, then you're kind of seeing the point of me actually bringing up this data. If we're talking about the group that's most likely to marry outside of their race, we're actually talking about Asian women, who by a pretty significant margin outpace Asian men and pretty much every other group in terms of how often they marry outside their race. Nobody is complaining about Asian women marrying outside their race except for mostly Asian incels. The only group to marry outside their race less than black people are white people. If you think about how often the topic of interracial relationships comes up in black media and black communities, and compare it to this data, you have to start asking yourself, why do we talk about this so much? But moving on, collectively, the amount of black people actually marrying outside their race is a whopping 18%. 82% of black people marry other black people. That is the overwhelming vast majority. And to go further, we have this conversation about, black men taking resources out of the community when they marry white women. And my question to that is, what resources? What resources, y'all? Are the resources in the room with y'all? They're not in the room with me. The research tells us that interracial couples with black people are most likely living in poverty. Furthermore, for all that talk about people dying and insurance and passing stuff on, interracial relationships as a whole are more likely to end in divorce than relationships where both individuals are the same race. Further poking holes into this nonsense argument is the fact that interracial relationships featuring a white woman are much more likely to end in a divorce, and some niggas ain't gonna like this. When a black woman marries a white man, it's less likely that they'll end in a divorce. I'm just spitting the facts, y'all. Don't be mad at me. Now, there is a lot of research that indicates that as African American people, male or female, get higher up in academic or educational or professional ladders, that they do tend to marry outside of their race at a higher rate. That is also in this data, but I want you to think about why that is. The reality is that it's really just a numbers game. If you are black and you have higher levels of success and degrees, etc., you are less likely to be in a predominantly black space or even a somewhat black space. You're highly likely to be one of very few African Americans around you. Are these people just expected to not date people that are in their economic or educational bracket? Is that what we're going for? Now, please understand, this section in the data involved here is not meant to distract from the fact that there is a minority of black people, often black men, who just love to talk about how much they prefer their preferences over anybody that is black. However, it is a thing that the dudes from Fresh and Fit will tell you is an easy way to get attention and go viral.
Bro, let's keep it 1,000, man. It's like, if you're critical of anything that has to do with black women, they're gonna always get mad at you and be in their feelings and be like, oh, you're racist or you're a colorist right away. You can't win. So it's
I figured out, bro. If you're gonna go viral, just talk about black women. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it, bro. You're gonna go viral.
So because this has such virality and it is seen and consumed so much on social media, a lot of us are probably thinking that this is an accurate representation of reality and not considering the fact that the reality around you is the actual reality. Black people watching, if you walk out your house today and you're actually in community with black people, you're going to see black people of all shades and colors in community with each other, loving each other. You're going to be looking at their kids on Instagram and Facebook and recognizing their families and aspiring to that until you see that one black dude with a white girl and then suddenly all that shit disappears. I have to ask, how is this happening and why do you think this is happening? Again, 82% of black people who are married are married to other black people. You have to start challenging yourself to think through what mediums and what processes am I getting this information, and what purposes does that misinformation serve to have me thinking that the actual reality that I'm seeing is somehow not real.
Chapter 4, you won't believe it, it actually comes right back to slavery again. Okay, Feek, I know, I definitely know now that you're f***ing with me on this, right? I should not be reading these, and that was your decision.
Sojourner Truth is an iconic name in black history. If I were to make like a tier list of black history figures, she would definitely be top tier. She was an abolitionist. She was also a major figure in first wave feminism. Her famous Ain't I a Woman speech is probably one of the earliest examples of intersectional feminism. In this speech, she speaks on the treatment of black women under slavery, attempting to appeal to the conflict between how society views and treats women and how they view and treat black people and black women, discussing the horrors of being an enslaved black woman, punctuating every few lines with that iconic refrain, "Ain't I a woman?" While Sojourner Truth did a lot for black people, this speech is what she's most known for. There isn't a black history play in America that'll happen this coming February that won't feature some little black girl reciting it. This seems off topic, but I'm going somewhere again. Wait for the hook. So a big reason for this video's existence is due to a backlash I got for the following tweet. You know, I don't mind how they managed the swirl here. I'm always suspicious at the overabundance of interracial relationships in media, but the way it was written made it work. This tweet is in reference to Across the Spider-Verse and the burgeoning romantic relationship between Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales. If you know anything about the character, then you know that relationship is canon, but as has been explained throughout this video, such a prominent black male character dating a white girl does present some concern and garner a lot of attention. It definitely got Dr. Umar in a tizzy.
Spider-Man across the universe, and he's bunny hopping in the damn trailer I saw on YouTube. How the hell you gonna have a black superhero cartoon for our children, and he's lusting and thirsting over the skim milk?
Because I've made my fair share of enemies, mostly a handful of white conservatives, white leftists, and their trash panda black friends, this comment was astroturfed through their Twitter spaces, various Reddit boards, and the like, as an example of me being anti-race mixing. It was the smoking gun that many of them had been looking for to find a way to discredit me. Unfortunately for them, it obviously didn't fucking work. It was barely a blip on the radar. I don't answer to white trolls on Twitter. They do not make up my audience. My comments were not out of line for black people who completely know where I was coming from, and no one who actually watches my content, black or white, believes that I'm actually anti-race mixing, despite how hard some did try to insinuate that this was the case. But for the sake of argument, and to answer the question as to why it seems like people care so much about interracial relationships, let's dig deeper into the intent behind this tweet. So this tweet was about representation of blackness in the media, specifically interracial relationships versus black relationships. Historically, black characters have not been all that present in non-black made or black oriented media. And when black characters are present, they're recurring side characters whose lives basically don't exist when they aren't around their white counterparts. This is a classic trope often called the sassy black friend that is already well known and well studied. And in the rare cases where they do have a life apart from the white character and get more screen time, you're still going to see an overabundance of interracial relationships for those characters. Outside of those anti-woke weirdos who complain about everything, society as a whole, specifically white people, have become more critical of how white their media intake is. A lot of people are no longer okay with shows like Friends or Girls set in a place as diverse as New York, but in a universe where black people don't seem to exist. As such, creators and studios are now trying to address diversity in their content by putting in the least amount of fucking effort possible, often by creating shallow black sidekicks or love interests. And if a black character has a major role in something, it still has to be immersed in whiteness in order to seem palatable. If I wanted, I could probably do a long analysis on representation of black people in media, but this argument isn't really worth all that, and it'll be very easy to prove it with a random sample of shows. So I looked up the top 50 TV shows of the 2010s list by Rolling Stones magazine and did a little light concert analysis. After cutting out the predominantly black shows on the list such as Atlanta and Pose, I was left with 46 out of 50 shows. Out of those 46 shows, only 26 of them featured a black character that appeared in at least half of the episodes. Yes, this includes Garnet from Steven Universe, do not get slapped. Out of those 26 shows, only 18 shows featured black people in some type of relationship.
Okay. I'm going to show you the history of it. I played this a long time ago.
In the Victorian period, for a white woman to sleep with a black man was not bad, it was disgraceful. It betokened a kind of a profound moral impurity. People would have been physically disgusted in public anyway. But in private, they would have loved hiding onto the bed to see what was going on in the bedroom. In 1899, this taboo around interracial love was about to be broken. The savage South Africa show had arrived in London. Topping the bill was a troupe of strapping black actors reenacting the African wars of the 1890s. Britain had seen nothing like it before. Semi-naked, black flesh on show. It was the hottest ticket in town. And 30,000 people flocked daily to Earl's Court. Many of them were women. And it wasn't military history they were interested in. But it's very unusual to see naked male bodies in this way. And it began to be noticed that large numbers of white women were going in and associating with the word with the Africans, becoming too intimate with them. And this caused considerable alarm. Today, women still go to strip shows and fall and scream and try to pull off people's underpants and so on. In the Victorian period, there was no other forum for them to express their own inner desires. Going to the African shows was certainly one legitimate way that women could quietly enjoy the possibilities of illicit and forbidden sex, where they could see black bodies naked, glistening, feathered, and phallic. The sensation of the show was Peter Longula. He was a warrior with a noble demeanor, a stunning physique, and a great way with feathers. He became an instant sex symbol. Peter Longula is an enigma. He was mission educated, and he had, if you like, acquired the ways of the white man. He had ceased to be, when South Africans a raw Kappa, as they were called at the time. He identified with white values and white culture. He had become a huge star in the white arena. 2 months after the show had come to town, a rumour began circulating London. Peter was getting married. The news caused a scandal because he was marrying a white woman, Kitty Jewell. The daughter of a Cornish engineer, she was a respectable and attractive woman in her early 20s. Kitty is obviously remarkable. She's going against all the norms of her society. Going with Peter's part of her gesture of self-liberation. And of course there was the sexual excitement on her part of being with somebody from a different culture. Kitty inaugurates a whole tradition still alive today of white girls going off with black men against the norms and the expectations of their communities and their families, etc. Kitty and Peter's relationship was a tempestuous one, full of arguments and reconciliations. passionate one, Kitty called Peter her demon. Kitty broke another Victorian taboo, sex before marriage. She moved into the London flat with Peter before their impending wedding day.
I think what you can see in Kitty Jewell are elements of what was known as the New Woman of the 1890s. She went where her feelings, her passions, even perhaps her sexuality took her, and that might take her in this sort of direction of what would be rather unfortunately a woman in Africa.
The Black Peril had now firmly taken hold in Britain, and the newly emergent popular newspapers, the so-called Yellow Press, went into a frenzy of indignation.
The Evening News started saying things like, there is nothing more disgusting than the making of a white woman and a black savage. This is touching a nerve, touching a raw nerve. A white woman is in danger from a black man.
Several priests refused to marry Kitty and Peter. Kitty's mother objected to the marriage. But the lovebirds remained undeterred. And finally they tied their knot. It seemed true love had triumphed over Victorian bigotry. Within months of the marriage, the strain of living a forbidden love started to show.
The story of Kitty Jewell and Peter O'Gill is rather like one of those movies about runaway lovers. There's always a point when reality is set.
Kitty confessed all to a local Manchester newspaper in a classic
Sorry about that.
tale.
I can't stand the locals and the way the crowds of people gather around and stare at me. I had to remonstrate with them. I feel I should have brought them to the first of an exhibition.
Sorry about that.
Like many people in mixed-race relationships today, society's disapproval was too much for Kitty. The marriage collapsed. Kitty's clothes and a letter were found beside a canal in Manchester. It seemed she had committed suicide. But that wasn't the end of the story.
2 years later, she turned up at the divorce court, suing for divorce. And the judge said, what do you expect, is it? Marrying a savage?
Peter remarried, again to a white woman, and became a coal miner in Manchester, where he died. Kitty was never heard of again.
The desire for romance and love and the simplicity of the human relationship was very difficult, if not impossible, for them in the Victorian period, where they were constantly reminded that they were savage and civilized, that they were abnormal, that they were stereotypes. It was very difficult for them to escape stereotyping.
Hostility towards interracial love was mounting by the year. It was fast becoming the symbol of everything late Victorian Britain most feared: decadence, moral corruption, and imperial decline.
If you look at the literature of the period, it's riddled all the time with threat, menace, fear of the outsider. You've got the Yellow Peril, you've got the Black Peril, you've got the Muslim Peril. You have Fu Manchu. What did Fu Manchu want to do? He wanted to rule the world, and he wanted to kidnap young white women.
Moral vigilante groups were formed to combat what was seen as the rapid moral decline. Interracial relationships were under hostile scrutiny. And instead, the National Vigilance Society, whose prying eyes were monitoring every move of the small population of African students in British cities. In 1907, Thomas Hill wrote to the Colonial Office complaining about Edinburgh student Bengali Omar
engaged in various vile activities in the public parks of this city. The above mentioned is a Negro from Lagos, whose manner of life has been observed by me for many lengthy months. I know a mass of information which I must tell you. I know him to be a person who has done no work of any kind. He is addicted to sexual immorality. The whole of this summer is spent in the parks, on the hunt after women and rich-looking persons of both sexes. 2 weeks ago, on 2 separate occasions, he importuned a young girl of respectable and good position, whom I know well, for an immoral purpose.
Hill was clearly a nosy and sanctimonious peeping Tom. But that's not how the Colonial Office saw it. They investigated the possibility of deporting Oman, but found he had committed no crime. Omani left Britain after he finished his education. Hill would have to find other things to do in the business.
It shows the level of, if you like, almost paranoia that could exist among some individuals or some organisations about the possible relationship that might develop between especially African men and British women. To see them having relationships of equality, as it were, was something which undermined this whole colonial order, the whole political order.
As the First World War came and went, the moral majority was losing its grip. There was now an enemy within. White women were starting their own sexual revolution, daring to express their interracial desires. The key to understanding this new mood lies in some of the popular novels women read. They were called desert romances. Later immortalized in Rudolph Valentino films, they were full of hot, dusty, interracial sex. Sadly, they are all now out of print.
Her heart was given for all time to the fierce desert man, who was so different from all other men whom she had met. A lawless savage who had taken her to satisfy a passing fancy and treated her with merciless cruelty. He was a brute, but she loved him for his very brutality and superb animal strength. A man of different race and colour and native. These desert romances depict an Arab of the Sheikh who is presented as highly sexually desirable but also brutal and often very sexually demanding. And the heroine of his novels is a young, beautiful English woman. One crucial feature in all these, she's sexually inexperienced. He awakens her sexually. I think part of the attraction of these racially other men was the contrast to the returning white British man coming back from a war, which they won, but yet they're often very defeated in spirit, they're often psychically, if not psychologically damaged. The racial other is not weakened and enfeebled by war. He stands right outside all that.
But white women weren't just fantasizing about black men. An increasing number were in relationships with them. And a backlash was building. White men were getting angry. Very angry. It was 1919, and a long hot summer of riots against interracial love was about to erupt.
Sorry about that.
By the early part of the 20th century, an estimated 20,000 non-white immigrants had settled in Britain's old port cities of Liverpool and Cardiff.
Sorry about that.
Largely made up of African, Italian and Seamen, it was a community that was to grow rapidly.
It's the first time really that ordinary, say, working class white people are in contact with the black men in a real way.
Now, that was a quick little bit of history of it. Now we're gonna hear about what's happening today but these are probably American interracial couples. Let's start with the older couple. This older couple.
We were aware that interracial marriages were forbidden in North Carolina. So we knew that in order to get married, we had to leave the state. So, again, we just did what we had to do. And since we had to leave the state, although that wasn't the closest place possible, we decided to go to the Baha'i temple in Chicago and got married there.
So it was a challenge kind of choosing Chicago because that was costly, to get up there and get back and all of that. But all in all, we decided that was what we really wanted. Neither of us had visited the Baha'i House of Worship in Chicago, so we both looked forward to that possibility.
And we were so excited. We got there, it was a Thursday afternoon, about 4 or 5-ish, and just ran around watching the temple from all sides. And the poor lady who was the representative of the LSA said, "Come on, kids, get married first, and then you can look around all you want afterwards." So there was nobody there, family or anything, just 2 witnesses, and we got married, and I left that same day, and I think spent one night on the road, and we came back to Asheville to have our reception. And we were going to have the reception at the YWCA, probably one of the only places that you could have an interracial meeting. And so that was very interesting because as we were dancing on the dance floor, I pointed to some people and I was saying, "Jack, are those your friends or people you invited?" He said, "No, I thought you knew them." So we discovered that a lot of townspeople had just shown up to see if this really was going to happen or not.
Which was really very understandable because at that time, as the word got around, I had some friends there, of course, and went to school there and all of that. So many people knew I'm getting married and then who am I marrying and all of this. So I knew many people came to say, "Well, I'm going to this thing. I'm going to go see this with my own eyes." And they went there, and again, some kind of sheepishly, said, "Well," I'm saying, "Yeah, everything is cool. Everything is really okay." But knowing, and I understood that. Some people wanted to experience this. This is the first time anything like this has happened in Asheville or in North Carolina that anybody knew of. But it was lovely. It was wonderful. There was no negative feelings. And by the way, several years later, after our reception there, my mother kind of casually informed me that there had been a bomb scare that night. She didn't tell me, and she didn't mention it to anyone. But later on, she shared that there had been a bomb scare that night.
After we got married, within 7 or 8 years, we left Asheville. We went to Atlanta, and then we came here to Montgomery. So for our 25th wedding anniversary, we decided to go back and celebrate it in Asheville. And by that time, there was a very strong Baha'i community there. And they did an amazing job of publicizing this event because we went back to the same YWCA and they had arranged for interviewers to come and interview us before the party, and then they announced it and they came to the party, covered that, and played it 2 nights in a row on prime time, saying basically how Asheville has changed, and we're so happy this couple is back here to celebrate their 25th anniversary. And in fact, our son Hami was then 12 years old. That we would be, because people had seen us on TV, we would be walking down the street and regular people would just come and shake our hands and say, we're happy you're back, we have changed. So that was a wonderful experience for us.
At the firesides and with Baha'i activities, I found myself with people and that we talked about things that were important in life. We talked about things that mattered. We could talk about God and purpose and being and community and those things. At one of these meetings that I was attending then regularly, there was this, well, actually there were many students who came to the meetings from Warren Wilson College. And this particular night, there was a special one that came, really, really cute, quite small, foreign, whatever, but something special about her. And I thought, wow, this really, this is going to require a little attention here because this may be something. And so that was Fafa's first meeting. She came, she was quiet, but there was really something special about her from the first time that I saw her. And I kind of kiddingly told one of my friends that was with me at the fireside that I think I'm going to marry that one. That was a little boastful, and at that time that was quite appropriate. But clearly there was something there. We were special, even though we didn't do a lot of talking initially and flirting and all of that stuff. It was just being aware in her presence and letting her know of my awareness and observing and all of that. Much of this was just kind of spiritual as to the vibes that were taking place between us.
Jack had been investigating the Baha'i faith about 10 months before I came. So it really felt like God was preparing us for this encounter. That first night that he's talking about, I don't remember meeting him because there was a big crowd, and of course I was meeting a lot of people. It was my first night at the Tuckers. So, but as he said, gradually, as we were involved both, of course, in the Baha'i activities, there definitely was a connection and a specialness. And however, in my mind, I had just come to go to school for 4 years and go back, so marriage was not at all.
Oftentimes, Fafa would be oblivious to what was going on around us because she was just being normal. And so, I remember at one point I had a convertible automobile, and of course during these times we would sit close together and stuff. And Fafa would just be completely oblivious, and we're just going along and whatever. And under certain circumstances, I would kind of carefully encourage her. Well, Fafa, maybe you should move over to the passenger seat right now.
Why?
And in certain situations, like we were to go into a restaurant, and I would notice people getting a little antsy, and they would stop eating and focus on us, and whatever. And I would say to Fafa at some point, like, well, Fafa, maybe we should kind of get done. It's no big deal. Let's get on out of this place, whatever. But just knowing that there is danger, and that when people start getting funny, mobilizing, going outside and coming back and doing funny things, that it's time to get out of there. It's time to leave. And so I felt the worst thing that could happen is for Fafa or I to show fear.
That's right.
That would be an invitation. Like, they're scared of us. So yes. So how do we be in places that were often recently segregated. How could we be in these places? And knowing that people are sitting there burning, their hearts and their soul were burning. What are you doing? How dare you? You know, these kinds of things, these feelings. And so, you know, there are next steps to those things. And how do we be together and have our lives and be fun and all of that, and also navigate being normal when abnormal is what everybody expects and are confused by when, yeah. So again, those things were never far away from my mind. I mean, I always knew I'm in the South and these people will kill you. They will kill you. I know that. And when you get that stony, cold look, and these people can't speak and talk and whatever, that, you know, that's on a pathway to something that could be ugly. And so, but that's life too. We're not going to give our lives away because of that. But we're also not going to be foolish. As a young person, as a child, growing up in the South, as a black child growing up in the South, all of these conflicts and all of this confusion and all of this energy around race and all of this required of me to make some sense of it, required of me to kind of understand what was going on. And I remember once there was a time, you know, again, being at home alone at this particular time, I remember I took one of my mother's mirrors, a little hand mirror, and I examined my face. I looked at my hair, I looked at my face, I looked at my eyes, and I came to the conclusion, I decided that my looks were okay. Now, in the South, there, everything hinged upon black and white, the looks, the nappy hair, the thick lips, the blonde hair, the thin lips, and all of that other stuff. It was a major thing. And so I decided, you know, 7, 8, 10 years old, that my looks were okay, that I was satisfied, and I felt like as a being, God was satisfied with my looks, I was satisfied with my looks. And I decided that if anybody had a problem with my looks, my color, whatever, that they had a problem, and I was not going to worry, or I didn't have to deal with that. And that was interesting because at some other point, it became clear to me that there was a lot of hatred and suspicion and anger and frustration that also accompanied race, and that a lot of black folk really would profess that they hated white folks. Well, it's pretty obvious that a lot of white folk hated black folk or whatever. So, you know, as a young person, it came to me that I needed to think about and what my place was, whether I'm going to hate white folk and which camp I was going to be in, so to speak. This was a conscious process for me. And so I thought I would try out, because being politically correct was important. So I thought I would try out hating white folk. You know, let me just get into that, you know, to hate white folk just like many others around me, you know, whatever. And, you know, that felt like a lot of work. You know, this is a lot of work. I'm gonna have to do a lot of extra stuff and carry around a lot of extra stuff to hate these folk. I mean, I can do that. I can train myself to hate them, because there's plenty of reasons to, you know, I mean, seriously. I mean, the fact that, you know, as a younger person, getting on the bus, paying full fare, sitting in the back, and when the bus got full, if there was no room in this little quadrant in the back, then we stood up. Whereas white folk, they came in on the bus, they sit anywhere they want to. When their space was crowded up, hell, they came back to our space and sat in our seats, and that was okay. And so all of those kinds of things, you know, mother going to town and, you know, in certain stores she couldn't try on a hat. She could pay for it, but she couldn't try it on. You know, those kinds of things. It's like, it would be real easy to hate white folk. I mean, to really seriously just kind of put them out of your life and whatever. But again, for me, that was the kind of work and the kind of burden that I decided I don't want to carry around. So what are my options? That I would deal with white folk on an individual basis and collectively as the way they are. I saw racism, I understood hatred and all of that, but I would not hate individual people, and as I dealt with them, if that required me putting them out of my life or discounting them or whatever, I would do that, but I would not carry the burden of hating white folk. Also, I would trust myself. I would trust myself to be smart enough with white folk to deal with them politically and socially in a sane and a correct way. In other
Next couple. Try to time
out
it.
into the industry and trying to make my way. If you are eager to make change in the world, there's no place better than Belmont.
Hey, thanks for joining us for our very first ever Pull Up a Chair podcast. We're so glad that you've decided to join us. My name is Ryan Smallwood. Pull Up a Chair is just designed to sit down, to literally pull up a chair, engage in conversation that sometimes we're not willing to have. And on that note, today I'm so excited to have Jeremy and Ginger Barbie join me for our very first episode. We're going to be talking about interracial marriage. And just as a reminder, actually as at the outset of this very first podcast, to let you know that as we pull up a chair and have these conversations, I need to let you know that the views shared here today may not necessarily reflect my views nor the views of Aldersgate Church. But that's part of the podcast, is to engage in conversations that are sometimes hard, difficult, and conversations that sometimes the person across the table may not see things the same way we do. But that's okay. We can still have that conversation and need to have that conversation. And I think this topic of interracial marriage is a conversation that sometimes the church has shied away from for a very long time. And so I'm excited that you guys are willing to be here today to talk about it with us. And so why don't you guys just introduce yourselves first, and then we'll just kind of jump in with letting you tell us a little bit about your background, your history, some life experience, and we'll go from there. Maybe me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go. Jeremy Barbie grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I'm the oldest of three boys. I don't know, what else you want to know about me? I mean, I sell aviation insurance, so I'm a small business owner and have an insurance agency licensed in like 15 states here in Lubbock, Texas. Yeah. So we'll just say it right off the top of the podcast, Jeremy. So some people may be listening in, they may be exercising or shopping or driving or whatever, and so they're not watching. And so let's just state the obvious from the beginning for those who are listening and not watching. You're a black man. Yes. So yes. They probably need to know that if they don't know you already. Tell us a little bit, Jeremy, about what it was like to grow up in a black family in Virginia.
Sure. So growing up, the city that I was born in Richmond, Virginia, is predominantly black, or at least was when I was there. I'm assuming it still is. And so the schools that I went to, both elementary schools and as well as middle school I went through 7th grade, was mostly black. And so the school was mostly black, our church we went to was mostly black, and so I would have one or two white kids that were in my class, but otherwise predominantly black school. And I mean, we knew that the city of Richmond, because you learned about that in school, was racially different than the rest of the country. And so even though Richmond was, I want to say, probably 70% black, that the rest of the country were the minority. And so as a black person, I was a minority in the rest of the country. And so that's really, was definitely something that was in the back of my head. And so my parents grew up during the Civil Rights era, and so they experienced segregation and more direct racism. And so those are definitely things that for me as a kid, I always thought, well, that's stuff that's in the history books, it's stuff that my parents went through, but it's not really things that me and my brothers would have to experience. At least I thought I didn't have to. But I experienced some of those same issues, some of those same issues of racism, of prejudice, of being discriminated against because of the color of my skin.
Yeah. And I know you've shared a few of those stories with me and us here at Aldersgate Church. Just tell us a story or two about some of the racism that you experienced growing up, or because I think, especially for people like myself who are white, we sometimes think these things really don't exist, or if we think they did exist, it was a long time ago, right. but not in someone of your age. And so share a story or two with us that would help us put in context the racism that you really did face and do face day in and day out.
I'll let you know maybe just a couple of stories. One of them happened when I was in college, and so I had an opportunity to serve as a missionary doing summer missions on a creative worship team. I like to sing and dance and act, so kind of right up my alley. One of those opportunities allowed me to go to a church and visit there, and so then the following school year, I get a phone call from the pastor, and he says, "Hey, we have an opening for a youth director. I'd like for you to apply." I was like, okay, sure, you know. I'd been to the church before, folks kind of knew me, everything else. I had a really good time there. I thought I had good relationships, so I thought I kind of enjoyed it, and they liked me. They knew I was black, and so that wasn't an issue. It was an all-white church. But I thought, okay, I mean, they're asking this black guy to apply, like, they're okay with it.
They're okay.
Yeah, sure, they're okay with it. And so I go and interview, meet with the pastor, we talk. I meet with the board of elders, we talk. And then I have a meeting before the entire church. And I have never experienced a grilling like that in my life. I am 19 or 20 at the time. I don't remember exactly how old I was when I'm doing this. And I mean, they asked me all kinds of questions about stuff I expected about my faith and all that, but also just racial stuff too. And so all kinds of things, pokes and prods and everything else. They did eventually hire me, but there was a member of the church, and I don't know if he was part of the elders or if he was just a member of the church, who voted no for me to come on board. And the only reason he voted no is because I was black.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, not giving away your age here, but this is recent history. I mean,
yes, this is like 2000, 2001.
That's right.
I mean, so this is very recent history. This is not 50 years ago or 70 years ago. This was,
yeah.
And it was in a church. In a church.
Yeah. So,
in a church,
yeah. I know you could go on all day telling us stories about some of these experiences in your life, and I know it's not always easy for you, so I appreciate you sharing that with us. And so Ginger, by default, that means you're white, since we're talking about interracial marriage. White with red hair, so tell us a little bit about some of your experience growing up, or just some of your life history.
So I grew up in Lubbock, and the middle child, which I found out today was National Middle Child Day, so there you go. Probably everybody forgot about it.
I think I got that.
Yeah. So anyways, older brother, younger sister, grew up middle class, you know.
Traditional white family.
Yeah, fairly traditional. But my parents always made an effort for us to not be in, like, I guess what you would say all white surroundings. So I went to a magnet school on the east side of town, and had lots of friends of different races. My parents would drive across town to the projects to pick up my friends so they could spend the night. I feel like they made a lot of effort to make our world not be one color, and I appreciate that a lot, especially as I got older. And so my brother, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but my brother played basketball, and so all of his buddies would just basically come and live with us, you know, for a time during basketball season. And so yeah, I feel like my parents tried to make it look a little different for us. And a conscious effort, which it takes.
Yeah, so which is what we're doing here. So we started this podcast, launched this podcast to sit across the table with people who may think differently than us, look differently than us, behave differently than us. And so what I hear you saying is that your parents were very intentional when you were growing up about putting you in context like that, where people looked different than you, thought differently than you, behaved differently than you. And so from that, you learned.
Yes, I feel like I learned a lot, and but then, you know, it's one thing to have friends, then it's another thing to marry someone of a different race. So that brought on a whole new level of challenges, maybe, and just different things to face, you know. So, but I think the way my parents set things up for us definitely helped that transition for Jeremy and I, you know. The fact that I wasn't in an all-white school, or, you know, that kind of thing. So
I'm going to ask you a hard question. You and I have actually never talked about this, and so if you don't want to answer it, just say I don't answer that. Okay. But do you feel like if your parents hadn't raised you that way, you would be open, you would even be open to dating someone of a different race?
I wonder. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I wonder if they hadn't been so intentional, if I would have been as open to other, you know, races in general. But I mean, I had dated black guys through high school, college, like, you know, so it was always, and it was not a big deal.
But perhaps because of your upbringing, it didn't feel, I don't know what the best word is here, but it didn't feel abnormal. It didn't feel a taboo. It didn't feel taboo.
Right. Yeah. Not near as much, I think, as it maybe could have.
Yeah.
So, I am very appreciative of the intentionality that my parents took in that.
And Jeremy, you and I have had conversations off the podcast about this in terms of racism or racial behavior or injustice, in terms of how much of it is taught intentionally and how much of it is just picked up unintentionally. And so I think what I hear you saying, Ginger, is that your parents were very intentional about teaching against racism and racial injustices and those kind of things. So, yeah. So fast forward a few years, and you guys meet in seminary of all places, right? So give us a lowdown on that. Kind of how did that happen? How did that shake out? Do you want to tell her or me too?
We just we met at mutual friends. Had a big birthday party, and
at a bar up there.
Yeah, at a bar.
We were at a bar. So.
We met on the dance floor.
How many times do we hear married couples, their story, hey, I met at a bar? I mean, that's right.
Well,
it's like,
but see, ours I think is even better because we met at a bar in seminary.
Well, it was all seminary folks up there. I mean, that's the thing. We were hanging out with our seminary friends, and like you said, we were dancing together and didn't ask each other's names. And so there was a bunch of seminary folks there. There's some folks, she started a year before she did, a year and a half before she started school. So a bunch of people I knew that were there, and folks that she knew that were there. And I don't know if I've even mentioned this part to you. I was out there just dancing with folks I knew, and they knew me, knew that I wasn't a creepy seminary guy, you know, and that I was just having fun. Yeah, they do exist. And so I was just having fun, dancing, enjoying just a great time. Well, I danced with my friends that I knew, and we'd dance, have fun, and then I would just dance with some of the other folks, girls that were there that were just new, and they would kind of slowly start backing up further and further away from me, and I was like, forget it, I'm not here to play games. Like, if you don't want to dance, don't dance. Like, that's not a big deal. And then danced with Ginger, and she wanted to dance with me, and so we actually like danced together and had fun and left and didn't think anything else about it. So the rest is history, as they say, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So there was obviously a physical attraction there. Didn't really matter the color of the skin, and obviously more than physical attraction as well. So y'all start dating in seminary, interracial couple. So at the seminary you were at, was that typical, atypical? Like, was it were y'all in the minority, or?
There actually quite a few interracial couples there. Not just black-white. There were Asian white, Hispanic and black, Hispanic and white, and so there was all kinds of interracial couples that were there.
Actually, when we got, it didn't take very long, but when we got fairly serious, there was one couple that was married, and I just asked, like, hey, can we meet and just hang out with the wife? Like, what was it like for y'all? What did it look like your families? How did they react? That kind of thing. Brenton and Sarah.
Yes, yeah.
And just they were so great and helpful and just, very open. And then we found now, being married 12 years, that the same, like people that are just starting to date and interracial will say, hey, can we just come talk with y'all, like, what is it like, and see, and so I think that's helpful to have those relationships. And
so saying that makes me think that it's in y'all's experience and the experience of those who reached out to you, it's definitely still not mainstream, or it's still definitely not just common practice in the culture that we live in for the most part. Is that safe to say or fair to say?
I think
it just depends on the area.
It's different, and anything that's different is gonna, maybe go through a little more bumps. But obviously, even in the 12 years since we married, leaps and bounds, and it's so much more common. And as the years progress, I think it will be more and more and more. But I think it's not the norm, so there's always going to be some differences and different hurdles to jump over.
Yeah. So I grew up in West Texas, conservative, rural West Texas. Grew up in the church, and so I remember growing up, and I don't really know why. I don't remember why. I just remember, interracial dating was frowned upon, and it was not something that was definitely encouraged. And when any of my friends did start to date interracially, then it was definitely the buzz around a small town. It doesn't take much to get the small town buzzing, but it was definitely the buzz around a small town. So, did you face struggles when you were dating as an interracial couple?
We faced some. I think for me, I may have been more aware to some of it than she was. Just because growing up black, I had experienced prejudice and discrimination before, so I was more aware of knowing when people were staring at me, when people were watching me, when I was being watched in grocery stores or in wherever I was doing shopping, and so I was more aware of the looks that people give when I felt like I was being judged or watched because they think I'm gonna steal something or whatever their thought process was. So I think I saw a lot of that more, and I intentionally didn't say much to her, really to kind of shield her from some of it. Because from my perspective, I'm like, I'm black. God made me black. Like, none of us get to pick the color of our skin. If you've got a problem with me because of the color of my skin, talk to God, not me. I can't control this.
Yeah.
So I just try to be just someone that follows Christ, that follows hard after God, and be a good example to those around me. I'm like, beyond that, sorry, if that's not good enough for you, then that's a problem you have with God, not me.
Right.
So is it, Jeremy, even as an interracial couple, dating or married, and so is that kind of the attitude you take into that too? If you view people have a prejudice against that, is it kind of like take that up with God because we feel like this is a God-ordained thing, and so is that kind of your attitude towards that as well?
It is. There's a lot of times just growing up, and some of my family had some issues with us dating and getting married, and there's always the comment, because you see it a lot of times in athletes, professional athletes, black professional athletes will marry white women, and so it's like, why are all these good black men marrying white women? And my thought is, there's nothing stopping you from marrying a white guy or a Hispanic guy or an Asian guy. Like, if you fall in love with somebody, does it matter? Should it matter the color of their skin? Why are we really separating ourselves or trying to keep ourselves saying that, it's okay if they're the same color of skin as you? I can have more life experience with someone of a different color of skin because of how we were raised and grew up than with someone the same skin color as me. So you both felt pressure then from your ethnic cultures in regards to interracial dating and marriage. So like I think we tend to think, or maybe this is just my prejudice, but I think we tend to think that the white culture tends to look more negatively against interracial marriage. But you're saying, Jeremy, you felt that same pressure from the black culture as well. Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's always a big thing in the black culture about that as well.
You're not marrying your own.
You're not marrying your own kind. Yeah, and so that's the thing. It's like stay, and that to me sounds like experiences that you had, Ryan, just in the small town you were in. You know, it's kind of the unspoken rule among a lot of racial groups of stick with your own people. Yeah. Stick with your own kind. Yeah, absolutely. But I think from my perspective, in terms of being a white male, like, I didn't recognize that came from other races as well. I thought that just came from the white race. Oh, no. Yeah, it comes from black people as well. Yeah, interesting.
I think, too, as far as us dating, I think we had a little bit of a benefit because we started dating in Boston, so it wasn't small town, and so we did see more, like, interracial couples around, and so, like, at least for me, it was like, oh, you know, look, we would kind of point them out, like, look, there's more like us. Yes. And so, but then, like, when we would come to Lubbock or when we moved to Kentucky, it was like, oh, it's not, you know, as common.
Because you did move from Boston to a more conservative area and a more conservative seminary. So did you feel a shift when you did that? A slight one, but I found out later that apparently we lived near Lexington, Kentucky, and I don't know how true this was, but I had a guy I worked with, a black guy, who told me apparently the Lexington for a while had the highest percentage of interracial couples, like married couples or something in the country.
Hispanic population in Lexington. In our town, small town, it was a little more obvious. At seminary, nobody cared. Yeah. I mean, everybody's from all over the place. Everybody's kind of fish out of water. So we had no trouble fitting in there. The smaller towns around us, we felt it a little bit. You didn't really see, like outside of the seminary community, many people of color. You know, so much so that one time we saw a black family and I was like, honey, there's another black family. So, yeah. That was a little bit of a shift, but I know when we first started dating, I kind of felt like we had a cushion because we were in Boston, and so fairly metropolitan, you know, big city. Like even though we were in the suburbs, still you're just gonna see more.
Yeah. We're not in Kansas anymore, right? So exactly.
I want to show this one right quick.
How we met, when we kissed. No, we are.
But yeah, we're talking about our dating story today. I know you guys love to ask us, like, how did it all happen?
Yeah, how did it happen that a fine specimen as myself would...
Oh, no, ladies before gentlemen, you go.
Really?
You tell your side of it, then I'll tell my side of it.
Okay, just to let you know, there'll probably be a part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. So this is just the beginning. I met Frederick when I turned 30. And, 30 years old. So I was waiting a long time in my 20s for this hunk. And right prior to that, I was living in Dallas, downtown, and my sister and I decided, well, let's just move to Los Angeles. So we spent a little under a year there. For me, it was a very strict season of moving to a new city, really didn't know anybody but my family, really having these big dreams of what could happen, even maybe potentially meeting a husband. And I lived in my grandma's house, up in this tiny little room with a bunch of porcelain dolls.
Which I saw those dolls and it was slightly creepy the first time.
My grandma was so
that's part of the story.
She collected all these dolls. Let me tell you, I had lost my job prior to that, lost all my money, and had like $20 to my name. I'm not even joking. I was 29 years old and hit rock bottom. So there was many days spent in this room, kind of allowing God to give me new vision. Like when you hit rock bottom, you're just like, the only way is up. To just start visioning and dreaming. And I'd already been dreaming and praying for a husband for a while, but I'm like, now he's really not gonna find me because I'm up here with all these dolls. Y'all, this sounds like a little crazier than it was.
You won't find you if you're up there with a bunch of dolls.
I was in worship and in the Word for a bulk amount of time. I think my grandma thought I would die up there single, and all that to say, ended up moving back to Texas after 9 months, and that's when I felt like, wow, God's really shown me some vision for me personally. So I had been feeling called to worship and had never been a worship leader or anything, but then the Lord was like, yeah, you should go try it out at one of the largest churches in America. And you're like, don't think so. So I joined. At the time it was a choir. You had to be in the choir. And but where were you? I'm gonna pause right there. Before that, like when I moved back to Texas, a lot of my friendships had changed. I was again in this like felt like isolated kind of time. I was looking for a job. I was like, I cannot believe I moved back to Texas. Really was not thinking about a husband because I was just trying to get my life together.
5 years before I met her, I moved to Dallas, and just as I had a different church, and actually I was serving deep into that church, and actually that was at the point where I was saying, I want to become a better man. I want to truly focus on my walk with Jesus, and because I was tired of just running. I was like, okay, I hear you, Lord. I'm going to answer this call, and I'm going to just work on.
Man, you know how it is. The system's always picking favorites, tossing benefits everywhere but our way.
I hear you, Lord. I'm going to answer this call, and I'm going to just work on me becoming a better man. So I was doing that, heavily involved in the church I was at, and then fast forward 3.5 years later, I started felt like the Lord was telling me it's time to move to a different church. And I always said I wouldn't go to a mega church. I wouldn't go to a huge church because then there's no community. Nobody's gonna know me. I won't have no friends. These are legit things I was saying at maybe 25, 24 years old when I moved. But ended up going and listening and obeying and going to that church and just started serving there. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna serve. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just serve. And one of the reasons why I felt the Lord was moving me on to a different church, no lie. It was one time in my quiet time, I felt the Lord was like, you're not going to find a wife in this church.
Jesus keeps it real.
He keeps it real. He told me. So I was like,
oh, that's so good.
That's a real good reason for me to listen and obey you and follow your lead here. So I ended up going.
Jesus cares about your dating life.
He does, though. So I started serving here, and the Lord started, as he was actually working on Jacqueline and telling her that she needs to start pursuing worship, he was actually doing the same thing with me, and I was like, I don't want to do that. So I had these arguments back, I don't want to do that. I don't want to sing. They don't need me. There's no one up there to look like me. There's no one up there that seems like they like the things I like. You know, I'm in the style or all these different things. I felt like I would be an odd person out from everybody else that I was seeing.
Because worship leaders aren't in the style.
No, but I'm not saying worship leaders aren't in the style. I'm just saying I couldn't see anyone me represented out there where I was looking at the time.
Are you saying because it was a predominantly white church?
No. I'm just saying I couldn't see anyone like me represented out there while I was watching and listening. But it was great worship. I was connected. But at the same time, the Lord was telling me that's the exact reason why you need to do it. Fast forward.
That's where we met, the choir.
I guess we both wasn't really looking for someone at the time. And what we were doing, she was looking. My head was kind of down because I didn't want to be the guy that was trying to date all the girls in the church. You don't want to be that guy, the guy that's going out with all the girls.
Could have been that guy?
I feel like anybody can be that guy if they want to be that guy. Anyone can be that guy. You just have to ask a bunch of girls out. You be that guy. At that point in time, I was more so looking for the one, not anyone. So I wasn't lonely. I was just looking for the one.
Yeah, I think and we haven't even went into our past, but I think Frederick and I had walked many years to this point with the Lord. So who we were like 7 years prior to that as like club kids. I mean, I was a dummy. Like when I saw him, I was immediately like, okay. Like I thought you were good looking. Like obviously.
No, but why do you have that reaction?
Because you were
exactly.
You were wearing a tight shirt.
Guys, I was wearing an extra large shirt.
No, you were wearing a tight shirt, and then he had to speak in front of everybody.
She said it's tight because she said the first time she saw me, I had all my arms out, and then I got called on to tell where I was from by the choir director because I'm from the Bahamas.
You know what you're doing. You know what size shirt you want to put on to enhance your muscles.
I wore my size shirt.
No, you were out there like,
She told me to raise my hands. I was like, I played basketball, so I raised my hands.
And then that was number 2. So I...
Just because your eyes beheld something you like, we'll try that.
Beheld something I like.
Try to find the most churchy word I can use.
It beheld his muscles, and I was literally like, automatically he said athlete.
Yeah.
He had the tight shirt on.
I said I played basketball in college.
And he was like, the only black person in there. So then I was like, I'm highly attracted to this person, but I'm not gonna just target. I'm just not gonna like.
She tried to put me in a box.
I put you in a box, and then I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy. But then as like we kept showing up to choir, I'm like, I am really into this person, but I'm gonna stay.
And music started playing in our ears.
No, what had happened is you and a guy in there. Okay, so because I didn't come from like a super church back. Like I grew up in church obviously, but like I didn't spend youth in church. I didn't spend my young adult life in church. I barely had a Christian friend. I at times felt like, oh my gosh, I'm the girl who loves like R&B and this and that. And him and a guy during one of the Sunday services started singing like, what'd y'all sing?
Oh, we were singing Prerogative.
During while they were walking up.
They were walking up, I was singing. I actually started singing it, and I was surprised that he finished it. So I was like, whoa!
Yeah, they were back there cracking jokes, and I had not talked to him yet. And I turned around, and I was like, oh my gosh, I think
with the most judgy facial expression you could ever see.
But it was more
so
like
I was like, don't worry about that. You don't know nothing about that right there. I was like, don't worry about it.
Stay back. And I was like, no, what I'm saying is like,
you don't know about.
So he's thinking I'm like judgy church girl, but I'm thinking there are people like me in this church.
That was really like our first interaction.
But what I'm saying is like, it just kind of became a safe place for us to flirt and get to know one another.
There's only one advanced level of urgent care, led by Ohio State.
Shout out to the couple. You can probably go to their webpage. This video is gonna be kind of long, but already kind of long. So what we have learned here, that despite the stereotypes from the earlier videos, the statistics from earlier videos, you can see some interracial couples. The one older couple was married for over 50-some years. The next couple was married for 12 years. This couple getting together. And I'll be showing more couples. I'm going to show you some black women with Korean men, white men. So I'll be balanced with it. But yeah, people are, this is what I'm saying. You don't know who you're going to be with. You don't know. So you can't say and use that God said that this was forbidden, but it was God that set the couples, have them come across the path. So or the Most High God. So that debunks that, because it was the Most High God through His Son, Yeshua Mashiach, set the couples up and put that in place. Why did it happen? We don't know. But for some reason, something clicked. So if God wanted just us to just focus on just skin color and at the nationality, none of the men would met their wives and girlfriends. But there's more coming. I'm going to show you. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe. And maybe you can learn something at the end of the day. Don't judge a book by a cover. Don't speak for God unless you in His ear. If you read the Word, get to know His Spirit and see what He talk about a topic like this as far as interracial couples. Alright then, be blessed and see you on the next video.